Hello, today we're going to read Franny K. Stein Mad Scientist. Chapter 1 Franny's House. The Stein family lived in a pretty pink house with lovely purple shutters down at the end of Daffodil Street. Everything about the house was bright and cheery. Everything, that is, except the bedroom behind the tiny round upstairs window. This was Franny's bedroom, and she loved it more than any place else in the whole wide world, because this was where she came up with some of the most exciting new ideas in math science. But as is often the case for math scientists, it was impossible to get her families and friends and families to take her work seriously. Like when Franny presented her realistically perfect personal cow to her father. "Hey Dad, have a look at this. I genetically engineered a real cow for the possibility that today's baby on the good demands. See? Fresh milk everywhere." "That's nice, Franny," he said without even looking up from his newspaper. Or when Franny tried to show her just the big scissorator to her little brother Freddie, one blast from the device can make things hundred of times bigger, Franny declared proudly. "Can you use it reverse and make your mouth smaller?" Franny answered. "It doesn't have a reverse setting. It only makes things bigger. But that's not a bad idea." Before she could finish, he leapt on his skateboard and without one swift punch, rocketed out of sight. Or when Franny called Percy, one of her new friends from school, to announce her new magnifier. You put a picture, something in front of it, flip the switch, and zap! It creates a real three-dimensional representation of it. "Did you ever put ketchup on corn chips?" Percy asked witlessly. Franny blinked. "Ketchup on corn chips? Did you hear a single word I said, Percy? The magnifier actually makes real things from pictures and pictures from real things. It's totally madness." "I like corn chips," he said, and Franny hung up the phone. Franny's mom had been watching, and she felt bad for Franny. She might not have been chosen to be a mad scientist for her daughter, but that's what Franny was. And silence that what Franny was, her mom had slept a lot of times trying to learn about mad science. One of the things she learned was this: mad scientists need an assistant to whom they can show their tiny cows, weird devices, and crazy gizmos. Assistants who were always excited and who always listened. One afternoon, Franny's mom suddenly poked her head into Franny's room. When poking one head into a mad scientist's lab, it's always best to do so cautiously. "Franny, honey, I have somebody I want you to meet." "I'm kinda busy here, Mom. I'm working on a machine that will make a dirty sock smell worse." "Why would you do that?" Franny's mom asked. Franny's part then said, "I guess you wouldn't, Mom, but that's how mad science works." "Okay, but I just thought you might like to meet your new lab assistant." "A lab assistant?" Franny said, totally forgetting about the sock experiment. More than anything, she had always wanted her very own lab assistant. Well, her mom said, he's not a pure lab. He's also a part poodle, part chihuahua, part bagel, part spaniel, part shepherd, and part some kind of Weasley thing that's not even actually a dog. Franny stared blankly at things Mom had end up the leash. But you'll always be interested and excited about your project, sweetheart, and you can teach him to be our assistant. His name's Igor. Igor coughed and choked his head. A few fleas hopped around his fur. He could tell right away that he liked Franny, and he hoped she liked him return. Oh, it's a dog, Franny said flatly, looking at Igor like he was half glassed of warm water. I thought you meant Franny was ready to tell Mom to take Igor away. But as she looked into her mother's smiling face, she could tell her Mom had really and truly thought that Igor was going to be a big hit. She couldn't bring herself to let Mom down. He's perfect, Mom, Franny lied. Thanks. I just know you'd love him, Mom squealed and handed Franny the leash. Franny led Igor to her room. Sit here, she said. If I need your assistance with anything, I'll let you know. Igor sat and tried to smile the friendliest smile that a dog with a mouthful of pointy, craggy teeth could smile. More than anything, Igor wanted to be a mad scientist's assistant, especially if that mad scientist was Franny. Chapter 3. Good whip is hard to find. Back to work, Franny said. Mad scientists are the hardest working scientists of all. They do not allow the interruptions like Igor to get in the way of progress. Igor couldn't wait to help. Igor, please don't touch the monsters, Franny groaned when Igor tried to complete a creature she had just designed. Igor, hands off the device, Franny moaned when Igor tried to test her new X-ray protector. Igor helped Franny combine several extremely dangerous chemicals. Igor, she said, don't touch the test tubes. Please, just don't touch anything. The next morning, Igor watched quietly as Franny get ready for school. Before she left, she stopped to shake her fingers at him. I think we've demonstrated that you're a dog and not a lab assistant. So don't touch anything in this room except your dumb little rubber ball, understand? Igor understood. He contemplated on not touching anything except his dumb little rubber ball. Because more than anything, he just really wanted to help. Chapter 5. What could be first? Franny sat in class listening to her teacher, Miss Shelley. Now remember that we're celebrating something special at the end of this week, Miss Shelley said. You'll need to have Valentine's ready to share. Franny raised her hand. Miss Shelley, what are Valentines? Miss Shelley never understood how Franny could know much about weird things but so little about normal things. Franny felt the same way about Miss Shelley. The simple truth was that Franny, like most genius stupid things, studied things that she loved and didn't pay much attention to anything else, including holidays. A Valentine is an expression of friendship or love, Miss Shelley began. Like for your mom? Franny asked. Well, sure, you can send your mom a Valentine, but Valentines also celebrate love for their others than you present. I'm not sure I understand, Franny said. Here is an example of something you might write it on one. Miss Shelley continued. Roses are red, violets are blue, sugar is sweet, and so are you. And I write this on every Valentine? Franny asked. No, said Miss Shelley. You try to personalize them, especially your feelings about that person. Okay, you're the boss, Franny said, although she had no idea what Miss Shelley was talking about. Chapter 6, Franny's Valentine Poem Generator. Later, Franny sat at her desk and worked on her assignment. I know just the thing to make this much simpler, she asked tranquilly. I'll create one Valentine that will work for everyone. That will save a lot of time. Igor watched quietly, although he really wanted to help. The next day, Franny showed her invention to Miss Shelley. It's called the Valentine Poem Generator. You put the same thing on every Valentine and Ripley just choose on the section from each column. It's called a matrix. This way, they could customize it for themselves. There are 625 different compositions. Franny's Valentine Poem Generator. Compose your very own Valentine poem. Just take one situation from each column and put them together in order. Miss Shelley smiled. She looked at Franny's card and then back at Franny. Franny, this is very clever, but maybe I didn't explain it very well. Perhaps adding some decorations or pictures might help. Oh yeah, Franny said. Like pictures of the boogers and Bigfoot, right? Well, I was thinking about a picture of something more traditional. Miss Shelley corrected. Like Cupid. Cupid? Franny asked. What's that? Well, Miss Shelley explained, Cupid is this little naked guy with wings. He flies around shooting people with special arrows. Franny was fascinated. And people like him? People love him. Miss Shelley laughed. And sometimes he has little hearts floating around him. Franny smiled. Hearts. Well, I like that part, she said. And he's always saying something mushy. Miss Shelley said. Mushy, Franny said as she took notes. And this is all there is to this love stuff? Franny asked. Miss Shelley smiled. Well, there are other things, like flowers and candy, I suppose, but Cupid is a good start, Franny. Chapter 7, Drawing Concretions. Back at home, Franny looked over the notes she had made at school. Naked wings, arrows, she mumbled, and hearts. She looked at her drawing. Oh, and he always says something mushy. She whispered, let's see. Instants are pretty mushy. I had to hang these Valentine's thing, Franny said confidently, and she designed a few more just for a good measure. Igor watched quietly, but he really wanted to help. Chapter 8, Cupid is as Cupid does. Franny couldn't wait to show her new Valentines to her friends. Miss Shelley followed the screens. See? Franny said. Cupid! Miss Shelley gasped. I had a hard time choosing the mushy things for him to say, but then I figured that nothing was mushier than guts. Miss Shelley was speechless. Do you want to see the rest? Franny asked. Miss Shelley nodded. Franny's Valentines. Franny, Miss Shelley said friendly. You better have a look at this. And she handed Franny a real Valentine. Chapter 9. Pink, cute, I'm going to be sick. Franny stared at the card. So this is what Miss Franny was talking about. This was Cupid, all fat and pink and adorable. Ugh. Now, what is this? What is that this guy does again? Franny asked. He flies around and shoots his little arrows and makes people fall in love. Pretty horrible, huh? Franny said. Miss Shelley laughed. Franny looked at her friends. She still don't understand them, but she was crazy about them. So if a naked baby was going what they wanted, that's what they were going to get. Okay, Miss Shelley, I understand now, she said. And Miss Shelley lent her that Cupid cards to study. Chapter 10. Working like a dog. At that night, Franny sat at her desk staring at the Cupid card. She still had a lot of work to do if she was going to get cards for everyone done on time. But her heart just wasn't in it. I'm tired, she said, and tossed the card aside. I'll finish the rest tomorrow. Igor watched quietly, but he really wanted to help. After Franny went to bed, Igor tried to sleep, but he was still upset about the not being allowed to help. He walked around the room looking at Franny's marvelous experiments in progress and reminded himself not to touch them. He couldn't think of anything to do until he noticed up on Franny's desk his little rubber ball. Igor knew that he was allowed to touch the ball, so he carefully climbed up the chair and reached for it. He took special care not to touch anything of Franny's things. Suddenly, the wheel on the chair shifted, and Igor knocked the ball over the table's edge. The ball bounced twice, then hit the switch. The magnifier fired a beam directly on the Cupid card, which caused an itty-bitty real-life Cupid to drop out of the other hand. And zing, whiz, zang, tiny across view towards Igor, and tiny Cupid started shooting, which is exactly what Cupid is supposed to do. Swing, whiz, swing. Igor dodged left and right. He made sure not to touch anything, just as Franny had told him. Igor advised Jars he couldn't trap Cupid in a butterfly net he couldn't have caught him with, but because Franny had told him not to touch anything, and Igor was determined to just as Franny was installed. Suddenly, Igor heard a click and a zap, followed by a large crushing prick. One of Cupid's arrows had bounced off the button of Franny's gizmos, and the gizmos was the Bigalizer. Chapter 12. Hey Monster watched the crosstar. A loud crash woke Franny and she looked up. Way up through the hole in the ceiling and saw the moon in the early morning sky. It looked pinker and squishier than even had before. Pinkier? Squishier? Wait a second, Franny thought. That's not the moon. That's the biggest baby butt the world has ever seen. Chapter 13. The holiday is upon us. Franny jumped out of bed in a flash. She was staring right behind the Igor as Cupid fluttered out the big, adorable, and incredibly dangerous lump. Igor, Franny said angrily. Do you have any idea what you've done? I told you not to touch anything and you disobeyed me. Now you have a release monster that I don't know how to stop. Franny's eyes flashed in a terrible mad scientist madness that made Igor wince. You're a terrible assistant, Franny shouted, in a voice so angry that she would sound like herself. And when I get back, you have better be gone, you sad, ugly, good-for-nothing little dog. Franny snatched her pickleizer and raced out the door. Igor sat there, broken-hearted, alone. He wondered where sad, ugly, good-for-nothing little dogs were supposed to go. Whenever that place is, Igor thought, it sure isn't here. Chapter 14. Love Hearts. All morning Franny followed Cupid's tail of Odysseus. He doesn't understand how big he is or how dangerous these huge arrows are, Franny said. It has to be stopped before he shores everybody. Cupid in the distance. Well, happily throwing his arrows in the distance and handing right towards himself a school bus loaded with kids. Oh no, Franny yelled. Cupid is going to love them to pieces. Chapter 15. Love is a battlefield. Franny above the scene just as the bus driver saw the massive angel of love. Immediately the bus hit the brakes. He tried to go in reverse, but the bus stalled instant. Cupid noticed the stopped bus and the little kids inside, and he was sure they wanted to be in love. Think, 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 Franny said as the Cupid knocked down an arrow and bowstring. The bus driver screamed. The kids screamed. Franny wished she had put a reverse button on the visualizer. Suddenly, she thought of her brother. Freddie, she said, and she turned the visualizer on herself. Chapter 16. The wheels on the bus go round and round. Cupid aimed and twang! He raised a giant arrow, shooting it rocking towards the bus and the Franny come hurtling toward the air. She slammed her right foot on the top of the bus and dragged her left foot to the dirt as she had never had seen her brother do the conscious time. With a mighty push, Franny was off. Franny waved her way through the streets, riding the bus like the biggest skateboard in the world. Cupid flew after her in the hot brush, flying around after arrow. With Franny ducked and drug and as she desperately not to wipe out. I have to get back to my lab, she thought, and she headed towards Daffodil Street. Chapter 17. Mom always says to wear your helmet when you become a gigantic skateboard on the school bus. Franny craved her way around the tight turn and huddled towards home. This skateboarding is kind of fun, she said. It's not nearly as hard as Freddie says it. Franny bounced the wheel off the curb, breaking an axle and letting Franny flying. She yelled as she tumbled towards the air and landed on the first lawn with a very painful crush. Cupid landed the end of the Daffodil Street and stomped towards the stopped bus. He had an arrow all ready to go. This looks like the end, Franny held spinning. She dragged herself in front of the bus and glared defiantly. Cupid pulled back on their arrow and again took aim. Just as the mouthful with craggy, pointy teeth sunk into his giant, squishy butt. Cupid howled and jumped, and the arrow instantly Franny missed her by inch, and Cupid spun around. Franny saw Igor dangling from Cupid's sore pink rams. Igor had saved her. He had saved the kids on the bus. Cupid snatched up Igor in his butt and threw him to the ground. He was about to return his attention to Franny when he got a good look at Igor. Igor was ugly. He was small and pitiful. But more than anything, Cupid could sense that Igor was heartbroken, and broken hearts was something of great instant to Cupid. Good, Cupid's distracted, Franny groaned. Now we can get out of here. She started to lomp away, slowly dragged the bus with her. Cupid held Igor down with his big fat pink foot and stared at him. This, thought Cupid, is the brokenest broken heart I've ever seen. This called for an extra big arrow. Cupid reached for the biggest one he had. Chapter 18. Nope, not tacos. Franny had taken more than 3 thimble steps and she stopped. She remembered when Igor helped with the monster. That actually was pretty funny, she thought. She remembered that she helped her X-ray protester. Also pretty funny. She remembered how he had risked his life to save her. She let go of the bus. She was overwhelmed by a strange and powerful electricity charging through her body. A side effect on a visualizer, an injury to her nerves by systems stunned in the bus rep. Yesterday's cafeteria tacos not sitting so well. Franny felt strange, impressed. She felt strong and focused. This wasn't high birthday. This wasn't a chemical reaction. This wasn't a special premonition. She looked at Igor. "Egad," she whispered, and her heart melted. Chapter 19. It's mad science time. Must save Igor, was all Franny could say. But how? Franny's massive brain ran contraction and sensed it as bleeding speed. Franny knew that he could never take Cupid a fight. He had the bow and an arrow, and besides, he wouldn't bear a clover boy, even a 50-foot one. A baby is a baby, right? As Cupid put the arrow in the bow, Igor looked over at Franny. "A baby is a baby!" Franny screamed. "He might be gigantic, the best and arrow-slinging Cupid, but he's still a baby." Franny pulled the roof over the house and toward the house of a Valenti lavatory. Where are you? Where are you?" she yelled. Finally, she stopped. "There you are," she said, and fired the big laser. Chapter 20. Under Madness. Back the street, Igor closed his eyes as hard as he could and waited for the twang of Cupid's arrow. But he didn't hear a twang. He heard a splash, or was it splosh? It was that sort of squirty sound you hear when you turn the garden hose to full blast. But then he had slurpy sounds with a moo. He opened his eyes. Cupid was slobbing a long system full of some liquid, and that at the other end was a long stream was Franny. She had used the big laser on the personal cow that she was squirting in the elementary gush of fresh milk. Cupid had dropped his bow and arrow and fluttering like a big chumpy baby he was. Franny Matt led him to a spot where she could get a clean shot at him. And while Cupid blasted himself with a cow, Franny activated that magnifier in reverse. With one blast, she returned him into a proper form as Cupid in a Valentine's card. Chapter 21. Franny stood in a yard. Cupid was no longer threat and the kids were safe. But spraying on the lawn around her was the smooth record of her lab. She should have never been the saddest little mad scientist ever. But she wasn't. She was happy. In fact, she was very happy. Igor was okay. And as smart as Franny was, she was never ever able to explain why, at the moment, he was the most important thing. She stomped down and picked him up. He looked frightened and sad. Thanks for saving my life, she mumbled. Igor trembled. He looked as tough he would cry. You know, she said, we mad scientists are sort of expendable, and sometimes we say things that we don't really mean. Igor blinked. His eye waned a bit. And really, this was mostly my fault. I'm the one that made the magnifier and the bigalizer in the first place. Igor smiled a little. I guess what I'm trying to say that I'm going to need an assistant to help me back into normal size and also help put this lab back together. And I was thinking that I'd like you to be my assistant if you wanted to. I'd really like it. Franny felt the strange rush of an electricity struggle through her again. There was something about reversing how she felt like was almost as powerful as feeling it. And incredibly, it seems like to be an effect on Igor. He sat up straight. He somehow looked less ugly. His breath got better, and as he wagged her tail happily, dozens of fleas and ticks jumped off his back. They must have realized that Igor was no longer the type of dog that they could infect. You're going to be the best lab assistant in the world, Franny said. Igor jumped from her hand and immediately started to help her clean the yard. He knocked a flake into a water beaker, which blew up, leaving the 12-foot wide cutter in the yard. Okay, Franny said, maybe not the best, but you'll be my lab assistant. Chapter 22. It Must Be Love. Franny and Igor worked together if they had known each other forever. And they fixed the bus and the kids go off to school. They built a device to shrink Franny back to normal size. Along the way they learned Igor could help a lot by holding things that Franny's giant hands would have probably broken. And then they made a Valentine's Day card that Franny needed to give it to Miss Shelley and her classmates. And this thing is just too dangerous, Franny said, and together they destroyed the big laser. But not before they use it just one more time. Chapter 23. And that's that. Miss Shelley and the kids looked around the window. It looked like a giant brown mountain and suddenly appears in front of the school. Happy Valentine's Day, Franny said as she walked in. She handed her card to Miss Shelley and her kids. Franny, she said, are you responsible for that thing out there? I am, Franny said. Happy Valentine's Day. It's for you. For me? Miss Shelley said. Really? Franny, I don't know what that thing is, but I'm quite sure I don't want it. Suit yourself, Franny said smiling. But it's not a thing. It's a chocolate-covered cherry. Miss Shelley gasped. You said something about a candy. Miss Shelley and the kids went outside for a closer look. and Miss Shelley let them dig in. It looks like you were in a hit one of Cupid's arrows, Miss Shelley said with a happy wink and enjoyed the taste of a candy. I thought so too, Franny said seriously, but after a couple of missions, I found that it wasn't even naked. So, Miss Shelley, there's something strange at work here. A phone note, a knot could explain this. It could take a month to know this. Months, Miss Shelley said, and she watched as Franny, Igor, and her kids slurped on the giant chocolate-covered cherry. She opened the envelope and Franny had given her and looked at the card inside. And Miss Shelley felt the same strange sugar of power that Franny had felt chuckled through her from head to toe. Happy Valentine's Day, Franny, she whispered. Thanks for enjoying this video and please subscribe to our channel. Bye!